I am so excited for this talk because it's mostly an opportunity for me to like stroll down memory lane of one of the best projects that I have ever had the privilege of working on in my life with some of the best people I have ever been privileged enough to know and meet and become friends with. So without further ado, 0 to production in 3 months, an Elixir adoption success story. All right, so I'm not going to tell you more things about myself because Meryl, thank you so much for that truly touching intro. That was so lovely. You guys know me by now. You maybe also know Moby by now. This is him looking extremely normal in a sunbeam. He tends to seek them out. He is not here right now, unfortunately. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? I am going to tell you how a team that was new to Elixir over-delivered on a very big project in just 3 months. So what do I mean by over-delivered? We developed and launched a production system that spanned 2 Phoenix apps, 1 Rails app, 1 external API, and lots of complicated Kubernetes stuff. Not a big deal for just 3 months. You know how it goes. All right, so here is what we're going to go through. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the project, what we built. I want to tell you about the team who built it. I'll tell you why we chose Elixir. Then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the results, our wild success that I've been alluding to. And finally, what you're all really here for, which is our secrets to Elixir success. I want to talk to you about how we were able to be so productive using Elixir, what Elixir lent our efforts, and how it is that we were able to successfully learn and adopt Elixir. So, beginning with the project. This was a 3-month engagement between the Flatiron School and an ed tech company that we were partnering with to deliver Flatiron's in-browser IDE, interactive development environment, as well as our curriculum management system, all needed to be integrated into this other company's ecosystem. To do this, at the very least, we had to port an existing Rails app and an existing Phoenix app, and we built a new Phoenix app from scratch. Again, no big deal. I want to tell you a little bit about some of the things that we had to build. The details of these features are really not important. I'm just trying to give you a sense of what was on our plate as we started off on this challenge. So we needed to build some features where students can click a button in a web app that forks and clones their own copy of a GitHub repo that contains an interactive lesson. Students should be able to write and run code for that lesson directly in their browser using our amazing IDE. Teachers should be able to manage curriculum. They can create, edit, and delete lessons, and they should also be able to manage curriculum for specific cohorts or classes of students by copying a master curriculum plan, tailoring it to their specific class, and making it available or deploying it to those classes. That's a lot of stuff, right? And this was just our MVP project. In addition to all of these technical challenges, this tall order of feature sets, we also faced what I think are some unique people challenges. And I'm now going to tell you a little bit about the team. And there they are. They look so pretty. More than just a bunch of pretty faces at a fabulous rooftop bar in K-Town, though. We were a combination of 2 separate teams from 2 totally different companies. One group from the Flatiron School, one from our partner EdTech company. We had just 1 engineer who had over a year of Elixir experience, 3 folks with about 6 months of Elixir experience, and 3 with no Elixir experience at all. Everybody with prior Elixir experience was on the Flatiron side. Everybody without Elixir experience was on the non-Flatiron side. So we had not only a big list of technical goals and a short time frame, because 3 months really flies by when you're starting from scratch with 2 teams who have never even met before. We also had the challenge of bringing 2 teams together for the first time ever. We had to establish new norms and new practices, and we had to learn and teach Elixir. So with all of these challenges, why would we choose Elixir? Why would we choose what was essentially a brand new language for a group of people that didn't know it before and would have to maintain this stuff in the future? I want to give you a little bit of background before I answer that question. So we had 2 choices for our greenfield application, Rails or Phoenix. We were porting over an existing Rails application into this other company's ecosystem, and we were porting over an existing Phoenix application into this company's ecosystem. So yes, they would be on the hook for maintaining this legacy Phoenix app that we were pulling in, but that doesn't mean that we had to choose Phoenix for the greenfield app that we would be building together and handing to this other team to maintain in the future. Again, the team that would maintain this new app until what I assume is the heat death of the universe was 100% new to Elixir. So a choice to build in Phoenix was really for them a choice to go all in and adopt Elixir. And now I want to tell you how we made the case for that. Elixir really was the right tool for this job. So the case in part did kind of make itself. We needed concurrency to handle the high volume of lessons that would be deployed or made available to a cohort of students. And we needed fault tolerance to gracefully handle communication failure with external systems. Our curriculum management system in particular was very, very heavily reliant on an external system, which was the GitHub API. So if anybody has gone on all in and built like a ton of features at a very high load that relies on an external API, you know how important it is to be able to have a very, very fine-grained control of how you're going to handle failure scenarios. So not only was it the right tool for the job to solve some of the technical problems that our feature sets demanded of us, we also had some awesome Elixir evangelists on the team. We had some strong Elixir evangelists at Flatiron who got the internal team, the folks at Flatiron, excited about working with Elixir, and those people were very vocally committed to training and supporting the new devs that would have to ramp up on Elixir. Where did this excitement come from? Not only because we were working with Steven Nunez, who brainwashed us all into being excited about Elixir, although that was probably 70% of it. A lot of that excitement came from developer happiness. And I don't think this is going to be news, really, to anyone in this room. Those of us who had worked with Elixir even a little bit, right, even those devs who just had a couple of months of Elixir experience, were totally sold on its capabilities and toolings. We found that we could be highly productive in Elixir. Like I said, even those people who were really new to it, with very little ramp-up time, folks were really flying through some Elixir projects. So as a result, those of us that had that experience were really kind of falling in love with writing Elixir, and we were sharing that excitement with our colleagues and with our organization's leadership. So we had the right technology, we had the right people that were advocating for Elixir, and all of this added up to some Elixir buy-in on behalf of our company's leadership and the leadership of the company that we were partnering with. So what happened? How did it go? It went so well. By the end of the 3-month engagement, we had deployed 3 applications to production, including, as I mentioned, 1 brand new Phoenix app and 1 existing Phoenix app. We had trained 3 new Elixir devs who didn't know a single line of Elixir before we started working together, and they would go on to maintain both of those Phoenix apps in the future. We delivered on every single one of the MVP features that I listed to you guys earlier, and we had time left over to tackle additional feature sets. And then we celebrated, because honestly that was pretty amazing. So, all right, so what are some of the challenges we faced? Before I dive in and tell you even more about how we were able to be so successful, I want to tell you about some of the hard parts. This comes up a lot for me, object-oriented baggage, and I was very much suffering from this problem. How many people here came from an OO background before they started learning Elixir? It's like almost every single person in this room raised their hand. How many people have written terrible Elixir spaghetti code that basically looks a lot like, I'll say, Ruby? Just me? Come on, yeah, we all have, right, if we're coming from Ruby. So this was definitely something that plagued our team. I was guilty of this. I struggled with this. Those of us that were coming from Ruby, coming from Rails, wrote a lot of really overly complicated Elixir code earlier on in the project because we were carrying through that object-oriented thinking with us. And it took us a while to really break out of that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Making friends is hard. What I mean by this is merging our 2 teams was really challenging, right? You had 2 teams from 2 companies. We didn't know each other at all. No one had met before this day. And you had 2 really different cultures, different rituals around iteration planning, how to estimate and scope work, stand-up rituals, retro rituals. We had to start all of this from scratch. And that was really hard. And one of the ways we got around this was being really intentional about the norms and practices that we were developing. What's the thing? It's like norming, storming, forming. What's the name of that? There's like a name for that cycle. Anyway, we took it seriously. We didn't just sort of expect that these 2 teams would come together and figure it out. You know, often, let's say you're starting a new company, you're spinning up a new team at a new company, you sometimes do have the luxury of just letting culture develop and letting norms develop, but we only had 3 months to get this done. We had a culture clash of 2 teams with 2 different cultures and 2 different sets of practices, so we had to really plan how we were going to handle these things on purpose. We set up stand-up rituals, retro rituals, pairing practices, all of which I'll tell you guys a little bit more about later on, but all of these things helped us really go from being 2 teams to being 1 team, at least for a couple of months. Another thing, blank page syndrome. So as you guys saw on our earlier slide, we had a lot of features that we were responsible for building. We had a greenfield application to start out with, And honestly, we didn't really know where to get started. I remember long days in front of a whiteboard, engineers and product managers together trying to figure out, what was the most important thing to build, how are we going to start our greenfield application. So it's one thing to say, we've got 3 months to add a bunch of features to a mature application that already exists, that already has testing paradigms that's set up, that already has continuous integration, that already has deployment practices. We had none of that. Even for the legacy applications that we were porting over, we were bringing them into a new ecosystem. We were integrating them into the infrastructure of a totally different organization. So we had to start from scratch when it came to the kind of tooling that you rely on when you're shipping new features that are getting integrated into an existing code base. And lastly, we were dealing with a high degree of technical complexity. I talked a little bit about some of the ways that we would benefit from concurrency and fault tolerance, but something like an in-browser IDE that can support all of our students around the world working concurrently, that can handle loss of connectivity, that's a hard problem to solve. Something like deploying curriculum to our students around the world at scale, that's a hard problem to solve. You won't be surprised to hear, I think, about some of the ways that Elixir helped us solve those problems, but we were starting out with like a pretty tall order of technical challenges to deal with. So how did we overcome these incredible challenges to be wildly successful? First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ways that we were able to ramp up on Elixir, and mixed in there, you're going to hear some of the ways that Elixir in particular lent itself to our tech stack and to solving the technical problems that I was telling you a little bit about. So Elixir has a gentle learning curve, at least in my experience, and I think there are so many things that contribute to this, but I'm just going to pull out a few of them. Elixir is really eloquent, which makes sense, right? That's one of Ruby's really selling features, that it's eloquent. What do I mean by that? It's easy to read, and it tells you what it means. When you read it, it tells you a story. It reads like English. And Elixir really shares that language feature with Ruby, in part because Jose came out of the Ruby community, and so many people that came in to contribute to Elixir, to join the community, also came out of the Ruby community. So Elixir's easy to read syntax really lowers the barrier of entry to new developers. If you're coming from Ruby, you absolutely have a leg up. But if you're just somebody that reads and speaks English with like relative fluency, you can pretty much read a lot of Elixir code and basically grok it, even without being an expert in Elixir. More language features that make it easy to learn. So we've got pattern matching and guard clauses, making it easy for you to implement control flow beautifully. No nasty, gnarly, nested if conditions that give you a headache to read. We've got the pipe operator, which encourages us to write small, pure, single-purpose functions. We can string them together into easy-to-read flows, and we end up with code that is highly composable. And clean code that is made up of small, single-purpose functions is super easy to test, right? And easy testing means a really short feedback cycle for developers in between writing code and evaluating its behavior. I think this is an especially powerful selling point when you're talking about converting new devs into a language. If you can shorten that time between, I've made this little change and I just want to tweak it and see how it behaves, I'm going to run the test, see the output, go back, make a little change. Less than a second later, I've executed my tests again and I see the results. This really makes for some fast learning. The ability for folks to get their hands dirty and not have to be afraid of making changes and seeing the results, it really accelerates the learning process. What else? Elixir's documentation. Elixir treats documentation like a first-class citizen. Anybody that's been on HexDocs will tell you that there's a lot of great information in there. The official Elixir docs are written with Xdoc and published to HexDocs. Nailed it. And the rest of the Elixir world has followed suit. Anybody writing an Elixir library, for the most part, is going to use these tools for their documentation, and so the standard docs that you're going to find in HexDoc are going to give you almost everything you need to work with most major Elixir libraries. There's also a lot of Elixir community resources, and this list is absolutely growing. So our team relied a ton on Elixir School and Elixir Forum and just blog posts that are starting to really come out in the community. So we've got Elixir's language features, the docs, and the growing community all helped our team, the people who had a little bit of Elixir experience and the people that were brand new, level up on Elixir in record time. More things that are so great about Elixir that contributed to our ability to be successful here. What I consider to be Elixir's robust ecosystem. And again, a number of things contribute to this. Fast and comprehensive testing. So I talked about how Elixir lets us write clean code that's really easy to test, Easy tests lead to fast, not just development cycles, but learning cycles for new devs. So I want to talk a little bit more about Elixir's testing framework. Elixir has a built-in first-class testing framework. It's called XUnit, and it gives you everything you need. I forget who else's talk mentioned this, but you'll never have that JavaScript testing moment where you're like, should I choose, what's a JavaScript testing framework? Jest or Cypress, never heard of it. Maybe I have. Mocha, what's another one? That's already 3. Puppet, Chai. You're going to use XUnit. You're going to use XUnit for basically everything. And actually, come to mention it, if you're building live views, you're going to write all your live view tests in XUnit, and you're going to execute or exercise, even your front-end code pathways and your user interactivity in pure Elixir. So you've got XUnit. It gives you everything you need. You can test async code flows. You can test code that involves message passing between Elixir processes. You can write tests that are highly concurrent and super fast. And you can easily mock with the mocks library. If anybody checked out Sundi's talk, which I think already happened, or it might be happening right now, in which case thank you for choosing me, you can learn more about testing with mocks. So all of this means you have a high percentage of test coverage, and this helped our team not just learn stuff quickly, but build stuff quickly. I'll say without breaking things. We probably broke like a fair amount of things, but I'll say we moved fast without breaking things. Or at least if we broke something, we knew when we broke it because we had lots of test coverage. All right, other things that go into the Elixir ecosystem that makes it really easy to adopt. We've got first-class support for releases with mix release. I'm sure everybody in here has released something with mix release if you have a Phoenix app or an Elixir app of any kind in production. So your team can build and release Elixir apps with native Elixir tooling. You don't need to bring in any other tooling to compile, package, and deploy. Well, deploy, I guess, but to get your code running on a remote server. And this means we have really fast deployment cycles, which was really, really important when we're talking about kind of the blank page, blank slate state that we started from. Of the 3 apps that we had to put into production here, 2 of which were legacy, 1 was going to be greenfield, we had no deployment pipeline set up for any of them. So living in a world where we could leverage mix release and get these fast deployment cycles running gave us a huge leg up in trying to tackle everything we had to tackle in that 3-month period. More things about Elixir releases. So you've got the self-contained release package. It has everything you need to run. In the deployed environment, you don't have to get your source code onto the remote server. You don't have to get the Erlang VM onto the remote server. It's all in the release. And it's really easy, I think, to take for granted how amazing that is if you've been working exclusively with Elixir in recent years. But just like think back to other languages and frameworks and how much effort you might have had to put into preparing your server. You don't have to do that because it's all packaged up in the one release. Another thing that we absolutely took advantage of here is how configurable it is to work with releases in Elixir. You can configure multiple versions of a release. So you might say, here's my deployment that runs our background workers, small configuration change, here's my deployment that runs the web server. Super flexible, super extensible. I could talk so much about this. I was talking some people's ear off over lunch about Elixir and observability. Elixir treats observability like a first-class citizen, and that is such a powerful feature of Elixir as an ecosystem. This is thanks in large part to the telemetry library. Telemetry has become the standard for instrumenting Elixir code. So pretty much all of the major Elixir libraries that you use every day, Phoenix and Ecto certainly come to mind, LiveView among them, they use telemetry under the hood to instrument like the really common events that you likely care about observing in the wild for these tools. And you, as a developer of your own application, can use telemetry super, super easily in exactly the same way to instrument what you need to instrument in your code. And this means that it is really easy to observe your code in production. And code that we can observe is code that we can fix when it breaks. And it's going to break, right? Has anyone here never shipped a bug? No, just kidding. Actually, I have a friend that says, oh, I don't ship bugs. And I'm just like, call bullshit on that. Everybody ships a bug now and then. So telemetry is awesome. It's super extensible. Makes it really, really easy for you to report metrics to the destination of your choice, doc.stats, ship it off to Prometheus. Actually, on that note, check out the Promix library if you like Prometheus and Grafana. You can basically light up that instrumentation in like under 2 minutes using Promix. And you better believe that we took advantage for all of these things. I think this observability is, again, an especially powerful feature when it comes to having people that are brand new to Elixir, building out these applications and shipping them into production for the first time. People who are brand new to a language tend to make a little bit more mistakes than maybe somebody who's really old hat at it. So making it so easy to observe this code made it really, really easy for our developers who were brand new to Elixir to understand how their code was behaving in the wild and to fix it when it broke, which, like, of course, it occasionally did as we were building out all these new features. So, did I already say these things? Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the things that I feel like managers talk about a lot is MTTR. Anybody know what MTTR means? No observability nerds in the room? Yeah. Yeah. Mean time to resolution, which, like, for those of us that don't exactly care about the nitty-gritty details of how you would measure that, I just sort of take it to mean in a big picture way, like, how long does it take your development team to fix things when they break? And I think the key to lowering mean time to resolution is being able to see what is wrong when something goes wrong. So if you're looking to, like, sell Elixir to your boss, frankly, talk about MTTR. Talk about how fast your engineers will be at fixing problems when they occur in production, because it's going to be so easy for them to see their code and watch it behave. All right, so other things that made Elixir adoptability a breeze for us. Elixir has a library for that. The Elixir community, as you guys I'm sure know, has produced a lot of popular libraries to solve the common problems in engineering, the common problems in web development in particular. So now we've got the authentication generator that's baked into Phoenix. With one little command, you basically have, like, pretty much everything you need for auth. If you need to get fancier than that, you can build on top of it. What else did we use? We reached for the Jokin library to work with JOTS. There's SDKs for most of the popular services you might reach for: Sentry, Honeycomb. What's the logging one? Oh, I forget. There's many, many, many. So when libraries fall short, we actually found ourselves rolling our own solutions with not a huge investment of engineering effort. So whether we were rolling our own small libraries and packaging them up, or occasionally actually dropping down directly into Erlang, since Elixir interops with Erlang. I think we ended up reaching for some Erlang crypto module stuff to do some authentication stuff. I don't totally remember the details of that, but I think I have an old blog post on it if anybody is curious. I'm gonna move this up a little bit. And this was a couple years ago at this point, so I think that the library offerings within the Elixir community have, I'm sure, exploded since that point. And really, there was no point during our 3-month development cycle where we found that we couldn't solve the problem at hand in Elixir. Only once or twice did we find that there wasn't a ready-made, out-of-the-box, pre-packaged library solution for us, and we were able to overcome those challenges when we found them. So this is what I would say to people who say, well, you know, the community isn't really mature enough yet in terms of there not being enough libraries and packages and solutions. I think that's not right, and I think it's changing more and more every day. I want to dig into this a little bit more, Elixir being the right tool for the job. So I told you guys just a little bit about why we were able to make a case for Elixir based on it having certain features that helped us solve important problems for us, concurrency and fault tolerance being among them. I want to dig into that a bit more. So it's absolutely the right tool for our curriculum management problem. And what I'm really talking about here is our ability for instructors to package up like a portion of curriculum, and we call it deploy or make it available to their specific cohorts of students, and they had to do this at a pretty significant scale. So gen servers and supervision trees were the perfect fit for us here. We were able to build fault-tolerant and concurrent workflows so that teachers could deploy lots of content to students quickly. Before we reached for Elixir to solve this problem, we had, in previous years, a Rails app that did it, and it was really like plagued with issues. Like the request to deploy curriculum would time out, the page would load super slowly, you know, requests would get dropped, and for our teachers, deploying content to students was a really painful process that took a really long time, delayed their ability to actually start the day and give content to students and start teaching, and caused a ton of support tickets to come in and really weighed down our engineering team. When we replaced that with a Phoenix application, when we were able to reach for supervision trees so that we could get concurrent and get fault tolerant, pretty much all of those problems went away. And the fault tolerance was particularly important for us here. Something that would happen to us a lot at the Flatiron School is if you would go to the Flatiron School organization on GitHub, you would see the the unicorn. You know, GitHub's like unicorn, like, sorry, this is totally borked. And it would happen all the time, and we would all joke about it. But it turned out it wasn't GitHub, it was Flatiron School, because we were putting just an enormous load on GitHub's external API. We used GitHub's repositories to manage all of our curriculum, which also meant that we would create new repos for every single student completing a lesson. Students get their own repos. This is before GitHub Classroom came about. I highly encourage you to check out Classroom if you're doing any education work. Classroom would have solved all those problems for us. But we were basically putting an enormous load on the GitHub API, and we would run into the typical kinds of problems that you're going to find when you have that kind of reliance on an external service. API availability issues, rate limiting issues, to name a few. So having a code flow here, having a system here that gave us a really high degree of control over how to handle failures and how to handle them gracefully so that it didn't prevent our teachers from doing what they needed to do that day, that was a really big win for us. It was also the right tool for our in-browser IDE, which was actually amazing. I'm so proud of our in-browser IDE, even though I myself did not build it. Has anybody used code spaces yet, actually, on GitHub? This guy? Is it like, yeah, a couple people. So code spaces is kind of like what we wish we had access to at the time. We wanted to build this in-browser development environment for our students so that they could clone down repos, have a full mature development environment where they could write code, run a web server, all in the browser. And this was to help students get over this barrier to entry and learning, because it's really unfortunate when you lose students because they don't know how to set up their local machine before they even know like what a variable is. So we wanted to be able to give them this rich development environment in the browser so they didn't need to know any of that stuff just to start learning and start coding. But building an in-browser development environment at scale is definitely a tall order. It had to be highly available and highly distributed, which sounds like Elixir to me. So Elixir had everything we needed to build a distributed cluster deployment of our in-browser IDE right out of the box. We could manage a dedicated set of scalable resources for a cluster of IDE deployments while easily sharing state between nodes. So what did this mean for us? That means if one node crashed and we start up that student's IDE on another node, we could port their state over so that they wouldn't even know that anything had happened. They wouldn't know that they had lost connectivity, and they wouldn't lose any data and any work. And if you have ever been a student in any of these online programs or courses, and you've done a ton of work and then it goes away, how would you feel about that? Really extremely terrible. So being able to make sure that we could protect our students from this was another big win. And again, before we reached for Phoenix to solve this problem, this was a lot of the support tickets and complaints from very distressed students who had given us money, right, so that they could learn a thing, maybe even quit their jobs to learn that thing, who are trying to do their homework and then their homework gets wiped out. So it was a really high priority for us to be able to handle this scenario, and with Elixir, we were able to do that. So these features, it's the concurrency and the fault tolerance of Elixir, helped us solve what I think are some of the hardest problems in programming, and we were able to solve them all with a relatively low degree of complexity. Elixir gives you gen servers and supervisors to treat concurrency and fault tolerance like first-class citizens. Elixir makes it possible for you, I want to say it's not just possible to build distributed systems, because there's plenty of languages and frameworks that enable you to build distributed systems, but Elixir is for building distributed systems. So it makes doing that kind of delightful, especially if you have experience trying to do it without Elixir. Okay, so these were all the great things about Elixir that helped us be successful. What are some of the tips and tricks that we applied to help our especially newer team members ramp up on Elixir? How were we so successful in training them to deliver these features in 3 months and then to maintain and own them forever? I assume they will never leave or quit, and that they're probably there right now doing this work. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We did lots and lots of pair programming. This can be kind of divisive, and I definitely wouldn't recommend it as like a blanket or a wholesale solution. And if you ask me on a different day of the week, I would say like different things about pair programming. But we paired very aggressively. For every feature and task, at least for like that first 2 months, we paired a developer who was new to Elixir and a developer who had some more Elixir experience exclusively on everything. This really helped. This helped us share Elixir knowledge, but it also helped us build relationships across the 2 teams and kind of merge them into one team, because you always had like a Flatiron dev and an ed tech partner company not named here. I probably could name it, but I don't know, so I won't. Working together on everything. And I was skeptical at first. Like, pairing is hard, it's exhausting, people don't always get along, people have very different habits and approaches, but we moved so quickly as a result of this. I was astonished at the end of every day to see how much progress each pair had made. We also did lots of lunch and learns. I know the folks at Smart Logic were talking about their own ideas to start a lunch and learn series internally, which I was excited to hear about. We held lunch and learns on all kinds of things, stuff that you would expect for folks that are trying to learn Elixir, testing best practices, how concurrency works in Elixir, pattern matching, and more. We tried to make it not really like school, though. We tried to make it fun. This gave the team a chance to share their accomplishments and take a deep dive into what they were learning. So what I want to clarify here, it wasn't like, hey, I'm holding school today, you have to eat your lunch in this room and listen to me teach you about pattern matching. It was on the backs of the individual developers to volunteer. And people absolutely did, because they were excited about what they were learning and they were excited about what they were building. And they wanted to use these lunch and learns as an opportunity to share that with their colleagues. We did a lot of other things to celebrate our wins. In case you couldn't tell from our original picture of us all at a rooftop bar, we liked to celebrate, but we didn't just celebrate with drinking. So we blocked out time at the end of our daily stand-ups for pairs to demo their progress, and there was a lot of progress to demo, or for anybody to just kind of jump up and share something tiny about what they had learned or unlocked. And that was also just a really fun way to start the day, because of that group, there was always at least one person that had something exciting to share. For bigger milestones, we held celebratory lunches and other team activities, and this really helped keep motivation up, it kept engagement high, and it just helped people feel, I think, really invested in the work we were doing, because they felt like they could really own their victories. So we did it, you can too. Adopt Elixir for much success. That is it, I think, for the slides I have. A little wrap up. I think that a mistake that people make when they talk about Elixir adoption is they think they need to have big problems in order to reach for Elixir. They think they need to have like a 9 nines, right? Is that it? 9 nines problem in order to justify using Elixir. They need concurrency, they need fault tolerance, but I think there are so many other reasons to reach for Elixir, and I think this project really demonstrates why. So whether you need to take advantage of concurrency, fault tolerance, distribution, Elixir can empower your team to write clean code that's highly testable, that's easy to deploy, that's easy to observe, that's easy to maintain. All of these things add up to developer happiness, they add up to money for your company, and I think that you can make a really strong case for it, even if you don't need some of the fancier, shinier, more buzzwordy features, at least right away. So we've got Elixir, it's got its many language features, many community features that make it easy to adopt successfully, as my experience, I hope, shows. I want to give one last shout out to the team, all these beautiful people who are not here today except for Meryl. Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say, and I mentioned this when I kicked off the talk, these were some of the best times in my professional life, and I think that it really clicked for me when Kate gave her talk together with Mickey yesterday, talking about psychological safety and how those like human connections between the two of them really empowered her learning and accelerated her learning. And so I look back on this time and I think to myself, how did we get so much done? It felt like we were just hanging out all the time, but I think that's part of why we got so much done. What we were working on, you know, we were productive, we were happy to be building an Elixir, we were pairing a lot and building really close interpersonal relationships. We were having a good time, and that helped us be more productive and more successful than I've honestly been like in any other professional environment. So on that note, you guys get a treat, the worldwide premiere of a movie trailer that describes just one piece of something that this team built. And this is the official trailer for Course Conductor, which is what we called our curriculum management app. It is directed and produced by the one and only Meryl Dakin, and I hope you enjoy it. I think you will. It's very short, so bear with me. Oh wait, will I have sound? That's a really good idea. Maybe this will be too loud.
5 teammates. On a quest to conduct courses. Will embark on a journey computers. In the face of great adversity, Sophi, Kate, Steven, Natalie, Meryl. What will they create? How far will they go? Course Conductor.
Thank you, Meryl. That was an absolute masterpiece. Do I have time, or that's it? I think I have time, right?
Now it's like break time, but we still have time for questions.
Oh,
if
okay.
you want to grab some, like a couple questions.
Yeah, okay. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, if anybody has any. Yeah, let's hear it.
You mentioned that you're early on in your stuff that you had to figure out some Kubernetes stuff with that as well.
Yeah.
Does it help, hinder, or are you neutral on that?
Who was it that gave the talk yesterday? Like, who manages the supervisors and it's Kubernetes? Was that Josh? He's not here. Okay, a little bit of both. Kubernetes is really complex. We were lucky enough to have an expert involved in the project whose entire job was to help us figure out these configurations and these orchestrations, but Kubernetes was extremely essential to our ability to deliver the distributed IDE deployments that helped us manage state if like a node goes down and we need to spin up a student's container on another node. So I think it really was like a really magical pairing of technology, but it is, I still think it's hard to kind of get ramped up on Kubernetes, and even though I usually do stuff with Kates every day, my understanding is still kind of limited to like the 5 things that I do every day. So I would say mixed bag, and if anybody has the secret to how to get really amazing at Kates, I would like to know what it is. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm curious if Flatiron or this tech company ended up, if you know, if they ended up doing other projects in Elixir after they saw the success they had.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely tell you about Flatiron. We were all in on Elixir in particular after the success of this project, and we spun up, I think, 2 additional Greenfield Elixir Phoenix apps after that, trained even more developers on it, especially developers that were new hires that had no Elixir background. I felt like we had really strengthened our ability to ramp up those people on this new language. As far as the ed tech company goes, I mean, I know they maintained the products that we built. I don't know if they built additional. I'm not sure. Yeah. One more question. Who's it going to be? No one. Yes.
You mentioned you were at GitHub?
No.
No.
No Elixir at GitHub yet. No concrete plans, but one can dream.
Oh, you're not at
Yeah.
GitHub?
No, I am at GitHub.
Oh,
We
you
don't
are.
use Elixir at GitHub.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But I was curious how the internal migration of GitHub.com to Rails is going, or from Rails to Phoenix is going.
Oh, no, I super wish that's what was happening.
But I guess more seriously, given successes like this,
Yeah.
do you see any kind of internal rumblings or attention getting shifted from these big Ruby projects to Elixir for future?
Yeah, I mean, so I want to pick out one thread of that. You said shifting from these big Ruby projects, so definitely yes to that, right? I would say that GitHub, so .com is like a big, crufty old Rails legacy monolith, but GitHub is pretty much all in on what I would at least call a service-oriented infrastructure. We use Kafka to implement messaging in between the various services. Services can be written at this point in usually Ruby or Go. We've got, I don't know if we have like any Node apps, but we certainly use a lot of JavaScript. No concrete plans at this time to build Elixir apps and ship them at GitHub. But there is this growing group of us, I think, internally that we're interested. We hang out, we talk about it. We have like a little Elixir meetup. So that's all I can say at this time. Yeah, thank you for that. Cool.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sophie. And sorry, you already did have a
I
speaking
already
pick,
did
but
my
you
speaking pick.
could do another one if you
Could I
want.
do another one?
One more.
But I can't choose. There's so many.
We'll get Sophie's second
Okay.
speaking pick later.
Did anybody watch the Disney Channel original movie Halloween Town? Oh, yeah. That's a really great film. Yeah. It's about a young girl that finds that she has access to a magical place called Halloween Town, where all the denizens of the town are like, here's like a man with like a jack-o'-lantern head and like a storybook witch. And that's all I remember about it, but I don't think I need to know any more than that to recommend it to all of you. Dave, tell me about Halloween Town.
Curious on your thoughts on Hocus Pocus.
Oh, I mean, I'm obviously very pro Hocus Pocus. I know it's kind of like a basic, like, every white girl watches Hocus Pocus at Halloween, and I am not exempt from that. I think it's a classic. They're not rebooting it. I guess it's like a sequel, and it's gonna have the same 3 witches in it. It's so exciting. It's so exciting.
That will be my pick.
Should we get a round of applause for Hocus Pocus?
Let's get a round of applause for Hocus Pocus.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks.